I have cancer. And my wife and my daughter both abandoned me. They say that they can't put up with this. I'm asking for too much because I need them to drive me to the hospital so I can go to the doctor and whatnot for my checkups. Well, the joke's on them in the long run because I beat cancer, and now I'm free of it. And guess who came crawling back trying to get into my pockets? That's right, my ex-wife who was not there with me through sick and all. Well, I have a surprise for her. I was diagnosed with late-stage Hoodgkin's lymphoma. When I found out, I was shocked. I was active, ate well, and kept up with bi-yearly checkups at the doctor, but the oncologist told me no one really knows exactly what causes cancer. I had a chance of survival, albeit small, but I was going to have to undergo rigorous chemotherapy. I was ready and willing to fight for my life. After I got my diagnosis, I sat my wife of 15 years down, Janet, and Layla, my teenage daughter, to tell them. They were devastated, but I assured them I'd do my best to fight the disease. I was more than worried about my family's dynamic, though, because the doctor warned me the chemo would be debilitating, and that I would need as much support as I could simply get. Also, the oncologist warned me the most marriages don't last the course of the treatment. I expressed these concerns to my wife later that night of my concerns, and she assured me that she'd honor our vows, stay with me through sickness, and do everything she can to help me. I have a very good insurance, sizable savings, and a trust fund left to me by my late grandfather. So, while my treatment would blow a hole in it all, it would not leave us destitute. Our house was also paid off, and I'd already set aside the money my daughter would need for college, should anything happen to me. My co-workers at work had a send-off party for me, and wished me luck in my difficult journey. I started chemo a week later, and it was absolutely brutal. I would come home feeling like I've been run over by a train. I could barely feed myself and hardly had enough energy to walk or bathe or anything. My wife and daughter did their best to help me. They'd bring me meals, keep up with the housework, take me to chemo, and make sure my prescriptions got filled. I tried not to ask too much of them, and when I had the strength, I would do little things for myself. This lasted for 2 months. I could see my wife and daughter becoming increasingly agitated with me. I could sense reluctance whenever I asked something of them. My wife even looked annoyed every time she had to take me out to chemo. At one point, my daughter stopped answering me altogether when I'd ask for a glass of water or help getting outside to get some fresh air. Well, things came to a head when I had an early chemo appointment one day. I noticed I was running a little late and my wife still had not come down from our room. I called up to ask if she was taking me, and she made a weary sound and asked if I could just get an Uber to the hospital because she's tired. Well, I was shocked at the time, but, well, I don't know. I called an Uber and also called the hospital to ask if somebody could meet me out in the parking lot as my wife would not be there to help me. Luckily, my Uber driver was a super nice girl who made sure I got into the building okay, and even told me I could call her when I was through and she'd drive me back home. While I was grateful, it felt a little strange and humiliating to have to throw myself at the mercy of strangers. When I got home later that day, I rested for a few hours and then confronted my wife and daughter about their behavior. I told them I noticed them acting a little cold as of lately and asked them if they felt like I was a burden. My wife said they were just overwhelmed, and my daughter said she did not expect me to be so needy or demanding. I floated the idea of hiring a nurse who could come in a few days a week to help me out and also take me to chemo. I also ordered a wheelchair so it'd be easier for me to get around when I'm too weak to walk. They agreed. I asked the hospital for recommendations, and they sent me a very sweet but stern bed nurse. She made sure I got to chemo on time, made sure I got my medication on time, and even on the day when she wasn't working, and created a care plan that included healthy meals. Everything was going great. The doctors were pleased with my progress, but my wife and daughter still did not seem happy. I was less of a burden now, but my wife was feeling as though the nurse was replacing her. I told her if she was willing to take me to chemo, fill my prescriptions, and make sure I ate and took my pills on time, then I'd be more than willing to part ways with the nurse. The only reason I had a bed nurse now was because I was such a burden on her, and she accepted this as a compromise. She asked me if I was willing to get a male nurse instead, and I told her there were none on the hospital list recommended. The reason they sent one I had is because she had experience dealing with cancer patients, so she understands my needs. On top of that, she's careful, attentive, and very respectful. She's been nothing but nice to my wife and daughter and me. The only way I was getting rid of her was if my wife and daughter agreed to do everything she was doing. But my wife wasn't having it. She said I could just do more for myself instead of making my condition everyone else's problem. So I asked her if she had lost her mind. I do everything I can for myself. There were some days when I could barely lift my head, much less stand up. This chemo has been debilitating. She went upstairs in a fit of rage and started slamming doors. I chose to ignore her little tantrums, and my main focus was my recovery, and her negativity was only going to stress me out and make things worse. Later that night, I got a call from my mother-in-law, who lives 2 states away, asking me why I'd brought another woman into her daughter's house. It was technically my house, in my name. I owned it before we got married, but I decided not to be petty. I explained very politely that I needed help, and the amount of help I needed was more than her daughter was willing to provide, so I had to bring in a bed nurse as the arrangement we had before was too much of a burden for her daughter. I had at the very least 1 month of chemo left, so long as the cancer did not persist or get more aggressive, the nurse would not be around that much longer. She did not seem convinced but left me alone, which was all I wanted anyways. Everything was normal for about a week after. My treatments was still going smoothly. Then, one day, when I came home from chemo, I met a moving truck in front of my house. My wife, and daughter had packed up all their stuff and said they were going to their mom's place indefinitely. I was hurt and upset, but was too tired to express it properly. The fact that she did this right after my chemo, when she knew that I'd be spent and I couldn't talk to her, it's just cruel. I asked my daughter if this was what she wanted. She was old enough to make her own decisions, you know. She said she would rather go with her mother because it was too hard living with me. I watched them go with tears in my eyes, both because this was exactly what I was dreading at the start of my chemo. I felt unwanted and abandoned. The nurse spent some extra time with me that day and asked if I had any family who I could stay with, just so I would not have to be alone. My brother was the only family nearby, but he lived 3 hours away and had 2 younger kids. Even so, he said he'd take off work to be with me until I could find a more permanent arrangement. When he came by, he was furious about what my wife did, calling her selfish and ungrateful. She never had to work a day after we got married, and I made sure she never had to wait for anything. My brother was only able to get a week off from work, but he offered up another solution from me. His wife's sister, Kara, was going through a brutal divorce and needed a safe place to stay until she could get back on her feet. Her husband was the breadwinner, so she did not have much money and could not afford to rent on her own. She was currently at university studying radiology on a scholarship. My home was closer to the university campus, so hey, it worked out perfectly. I'd have someone in the house with me in case of emergencies, and she had a place to be away from her crazy, soon-to-be ex-husband. I told my brother I'd be fine with the arrangement, and she would not have to pay rent since she'd already be putting up with me. She could have her pick of her bedrooms, I didn't care. My wife and daughter had taken everything except the bed and dresses. My brother stayed out the rest of the week, and his sister-in-law, Kara, arrived on his last day. He helped her get her stuff in, and she thanked me profusely for letting her stay with me. She promised to pick up after herself and help where she could. She's a super nice girl. I told her she would not have to do that much since my nurse would be coming in 7 days per week instead of the usual 4. I said my goodbyes to my brother and helped Kara get settled as best as I can. Things went well for the weeks that followed. Well, I missed my wife and daughter, but I guess I was the only one feeling that way because they didn't even call or check up on me. Kara was a huge help. She did all the grocery shopping, most of the cleaning, and even helped with meals for me, and she did not complain once. A month and a half after my wife left, I was declared cancer-free. Ringing the bell at the hospital was the highlight of my year. My nurse asked me what I wanted to do first now that I was pretty much cured, and I filed for a unilateral divorce. Then I focused on the next steps. Recovering from cancer, it was a journey in itself. I slowly regained my strength in my hair. My scars started to heal, and I was putting on weight. I stuck to my health meal regimen for the most part, but I allowed myself some cheat days for some of my favorite meals I had not had in a while. It's been 6 months now that I've been cancer-free, and I think I'm finally ready to move on with my life. I called my old job, and they're willing to rehire me for remote work if I want. I think I'll take them up on the offer because I will be moving away. I love my house, but there's just too many awful memories here. I want to start over with something smaller. She doesn't know it yet, but I'm going to be giving the house to Kara. She came through when I was at my lowest and showed me immense kindness even though we were pretty much strangers. She can sell it if she wants. I don't want anything to do with it anymore, and I certainly don't want my wife or daughter laying claim to it. My new place is in a quiet neighborhood in the sticks, and I'm looking forward to this beginning. Update number 1. Hey guys, it's been over a year since my initial diagnosis. I've settled into my new place and neighborhood nicely. There's a lot of friendly people around here, and me and my neighbors across the way, Dorothy, hit it off pretty quick. She's a widow who lives alone. Her kids are scattered around the country, but they come around Christmas and her birthday. She invited me to her porch for drinks and conversation, and she told me she lost her husband to lung cancer. If he had not left a good life insurance, she and her kids would have been destitute. So, I told her about what happened with my wife and daughter. I still had not heard a word from them, which is fine, I'm over it. I spent my time working on pursuing new hobbies. I got into woodworking, and I'm starting to build up a collection of tools. One day, when I came back from the hardware store, Dorothy said she saw some people hanging around my house. They did not do or steal anything. They walked up to the door, knocked a few times, walked around the house a bit, and when it didn't come out, they waited in the car for a while. She said she was about to call the sheriff office, but they left. She didn't want to get too involved because they could have been family. I asked her what they looked like, and she described a middle-aged woman and a teenage girl. Of course! That's my wife and daughter. I don't know how they found this place because only my brother and his wife know where I live. Why would they even be looking for me anyways? They left almost a year ago and never looked back. Dorothy told me that if they came back, not to come out and she'd see what they wanted. This is great because I have no desire to interact with them after they abandoned me when I was at the lowest point in my life. I called my brother later that night and he told me my wife and daughter had been around my old house harassing Kara and her roommate. Luckily, she had documented proof that the house was hers and in her name. Apparently, she lied to my wife and said that she bought it from me, which I think was the right move because if my wife found out I gave the house away for free, she would be livid. Still, I feel bad that Kara had to go through that and called her to apologize directly. Hopefully, the next time they come around, I can deal with this for good. I'm not sure if my wife knows about the unilateral divorce or not. I'm pretty sure my lawyer mailed a copy to her mom's house, but I guess they could have thought it was junk mail and just thrown it out. Either way, I don't care. She and I are no more. Update number 2. My wife and daughter came to the house again. This time it was earlier in the day while I was working. I heard the knock and checked the cameras, and sure enough it was them. My ex-wife still looked the same, but Layla had grown a lot. She was practically a woman now. I stayed inside like Dorothy, and I planned but moved closer to the door so I could hear them better. I heard Dorothy come over to greet them and introduce herself as the next-door neighbor. My wife asked her if she knew a guy named Richard, who used to live there. Dorothy sounded just as confused as I did. Did she ask, used to? My wife explained that her husband, not ex-husband, lived in this house before he passed away recently. She came to find out if anybody was squatting there, as her husband had an extended hospital stay before his terrible, untimely death. My jaw hit the floor. They thought I was dead. I honestly don't know where they got that information from. There was no record of my death anywhere, certainly not at the hospital where I got my treatment. Anyways, my wife went on to say that they were next of kin, so the home was rightfully theirs. Dorothy told them that someone named Richard did live there for a while, but he was a divorcee. She explained that while we were neighbors, I informed her that my wife left me and I filed unilateral divorce. She also said I planned on willing all my assets to charity. As far as she knew, I had no other family besides my brother, which is why she found it so strange to see two women snooping around my house. She said she could be mistaken, though. It was dead silent for a good long while before Dorothy asked them if they had a death certificate or a will. They said no. She told them once they had all that, they could take it down to the county's record office, and if they were rightful owners of the property, they could get the deed in their name. My wife did not take this well. She asked Dorothy who the hell she thought she was and started screaming, saying that she has no authority to tell her anything about her own husband. She said Dorothy should mind her business and stop being so nosy. I was so embarrassed. The people around this neighborhood have been nothing but nice to me, and here my ex-wife was, making a scene and disturbing their peace. I had half a mind to go out there and tell her off, but decided to stick with the plan. Dorothy, bless her heart, apologized and said she was trying to help. She went back over to her home, and shortly after that, my ex-wife and daughter left. I waited until after work to go over to Dorothy's place and apologize. She said it was fine. While she found my wife's behavior repulsive, she thought the outburst was kind of amusing. I wish I could agree. I knew my wife could be a little hot-tempered when she was upset, but that was way too far. If she comes back, I'm definitely going to confront her and tell her to leave me to my peace. Update number 3. She came back again yesterday. I was sitting in my home office when I heard a loud crash. When I went out to the living room, my front window was smashed and people were outside screaming. I thought there was a maniac on the loose. I wasn't entirely wrong. It was my ex-wife. She smashed my window and my neighbors were out there trying to stop her. Apparently, she'd been out there kicking up a fuss for a while, but I didn't hear it because I had my noise-canceling headphones on while I was doing some QA work. Heck, I wouldn't have heard her if I did not pause the mic just to, take a break. When I got outside, 2 of my elderly neighbors were trying to stop my ex from causing more damage. Both she and Layla were holding bats, and they'd already broken a few of my potted plants. I grabbed her by the arm and asked if she had lost her damn marbles. Needless to say, she was shocked to see me. Or see me alive, I guess. I told both her and my daughter to get off my property before I called the cops. At this point, I did not know my neighbors already called them. She seemed hurt by my words and asked why I did not contact her after I got better. She and Layla would have came back. I told her when we got married, we made vows to stick it to each other, sickness and health. And she broke them, and I wanted nothing to do with her anymore. She's no longer my wife. I sent the divorce papers months ago, and I asked her again to leave. Then she asked, "What about our own daughter? She's going to college next year, and I can't afford the tuition on my own." I said your daughter was fine with abandoning me too, and I'm ready to give up all my parental rights to you. You all should have thought of that before you abandoned me. I don't want anything to do with either of you. After hearing that, she went from upset to angry. She starts screaming at me, calling me selfish and, heartless, which I found hilarious. She's the last person who should call anyone selfish. I scream back and call her an entitled jerk. I said to make sure she never got a dime from me again. And Then she swung at me with a bat just as the cops showed up, and they immediately arrested both her and my daughter. They asked if I wanted to press charges, and of course I did. My ex and daughter start crying as loud as they can as they're being loaded into the back of the police car, and I didn't feel bad for them at all. I had everything that happened on camera, including my wife smashing the window, and I'd already submitted it to the police. After work, I ordered a new window and cleaned up the glass. Someone will be by to deal with it tomorrow, but for now, a rigged-up tarp is keeping out the elements. Dorothy gave me some buckets to put my plants in until I can replace the pots. I did some digging because I was curious about what exactly brought my ex-wife around. Apparently, her mom died 2 months ago, and they found out that the house they've been staying in did not belong to her or her husband. It belonged to his cousin, and said cousin came to kick them out because he wanted to sell it now that both of my ex-wife's parents were dead. My ex-wife and our daughter sold most of her parents' belongings and have been living in a motel for a while. When they came back to our old home and saw Kara there, they assumed I died and went snooping around for recordings of things I owned and bought, and that's how they found me. Anyways, they're being charged for vandalism, the attempted break-in, and the attempted assault. Since Layla's a minor, she's getting community service, but my ex-wife is for sure going to serve some time, since this was obviously premeditated. I'm thinking about getting a restraining order too, at least for now. I won't have to worry about her again for a good long while. Okay, so let's talk about a take that was in the comments section that half of the people agree with and about another half don't. They're saying Layla. She was an innocent soul in all this. She was a minor. She was the daughter of OP, and she decides to leave with her mom. But a lot of people are saying that she was probably manipulated by the mother, and she just didn't know how to handle the situation, so pressing charges against her at the end of the story was way too much, and OP is just being petty at this point. Well, I'm coming to you guys to know your opinion on that topic, so let's talk about it in the comment section down below. Do you think that OP went way overhead on his daughter when he decides to press charges against her? And do you think that OP's ex deserves everything she gets? Let me know your thoughts on this story. Drop it down below. Remember guys, if you're not subscribed to the channel, you're going to want to hit that subscribe button for daily videos. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Have a fantastic day, and remember, it's cool to be kind. See ya!